Dear gentle hearts, welcome. I'm so glad you're here with me tonight. You know, while time may add lines to our faces, our hearts stay forever young, full of dreams, memories, and the capacity to feel deeply. Whatever brought you here today, you deserve this peaceful moment. So let's be gentle with ourselves and let this story carry us somewhere beautiful. Sweet dreams, dear friend. You are valued, and you are never alone. Now, let's begin. Grace Gray was 70 years old, sharp as a tack, and completely invisible, which was unfortunate, because she had a lot to say. It started on a Tuesday morning, the way most disasters do, quietly, with burnt toast. Grace sat at her son Jake's kitchen table, watching her family orbit around her like she was furniture. Familiar furniture, the kind you stop noticing after 20 years. Jake paced by the window, phone pressed to his ear, his voice tight with corporate politeness. Yes, I'll have those reports by noon. No, that's not a problem. It was a problem. Grace could see it in the way his jaw clenched. Lucy, her granddaughter, sat across from her, thumbs flying across her phone screen. 17 years old and already fluent in the language of avoidance. Grace cleared her throat. I was thinking we could. Mom, hold on, Jake said, not looking at her. Into the phone, sorry, what was that? Grace tried again. Lucy, honey, how was your? Lucy hummed, eyes never leaving her screen. Grace picked up her coffee. Cold. Of course it was cold. How long had she been sitting here? The kitchen smelled like burnt toast and her son's expensive cologne and something else, something like loneliness, if loneliness had a smell. Maybe it smelled like coffee gone cold. She looked down at her hands. When had they become so thin? So spotted? She used to have beautiful hands. Men had noticed her hands. Now men didn't notice her at all. Jake hung up, immediately checking his email. Mom, did you need something? Yes, Grace thought. She wanted to say, I need you to see me. But instead she said, no, nothing important. And that, right there, was the problem. Grace left without saying goodbye. No one noticed. She walked down Maple Street, past the pharmacy where Mr. Chen used to know her name, past the boutique where she used to buy dresses that made her feel alive. Now she bought cardigans. Practical cardigans in beige. When had she become beige? The autumn air was crisp, carrying the scent of dying leaves and someone's fireplace. Grace pulled her floral handbag, her one remaining act of rebellion, closer to her side. That's when she saw it. The café sat between the bookstore and the dry cleaners, which was impossible because there had never been anything between the bookstore and the dry cleaners. Grace had walked this street 1,000 times. But there it was, a small storefront with a hand-painted sign, The Moment Café. A bell chimed as she pushed open the door, not an electronic ding, but a real brass bell, the kind that sings. Inside, time felt different. Golden afternoon light poured through windows that seemed too large for the space. The air smelled like coffee and cinnamon and something else. Something like memory. There was only one other customer, an old man reading a newspaper in the corner, his face hidden. Behind the counter stood a young man, maybe 30, with the kind of face that was hard to pin down. Handsome, but not in a way you could describe. The kind of face you'd forget, except you wouldn't. Welcome, he said, and his smile made Grace feel like she'd arrived somewhere she'd been trying to find. Coffee, Grace said, because that's what you order in cafes. Black, of course. He moved with an odd grace, like he had all the time in the world. Though, if I may, you look like someone who needs something more. Grace bristled. I look like someone who needs coffee. That too. He set a cup in front of her. The coffee was perfect, somehow she knew it would be. But I have something special today. For customers who feel overlooked. Grace's throat tightened. I don't know what you mean. Don't you? He pulled out a small glass bottle from beneath the counter. The liquid inside shifted colors, gold to amber to something that looked like captured sunlight. Young again juice. Made fresh this morning. Grace laughed. It came out bitter. I'm 70 years old. There's no juice in the world. Try it. Something in his voice stopped her. Not commanding. Inviting. What's in it? Grace asked. Honey. Memory. A second chance. He pushed it toward her. One sip. If nothing happens, the coffee's on the house. Grace looked at the bottle. At her reflection in its curved glass, an old woman with good posture and tired eyes. What did she have to lose? More invisible mornings? More cold coffee? She picked up the bottle. The liquid tasted like the first sip of champagne at her wedding. Like her mother's perfume. Like the summer she turned 25 and believed the world was hers. Grace closed her eyes, and when she opened them, the coffee was cold. She looked at the counter. The waiter stood there, quietly smiling. The restroom. Grace stammered. Something felt strange. Her body felt lighter. Right back there. The waiter pointed. Grace stood up. She felt slightly dizzy as she walked toward the restroom. The waiter's gentle voice followed her. Take your time. The bathroom was small, clean, with a mirror that took up the entire wall. Grace gripped the sink, waiting for the dizziness to pass. Then she looked up, and gasped. The woman in the mirror was 25 years old. Smooth skin, no lines around the eyes. Dark hair without a thread of gray. Arms without the crepe paper texture of age. Hands, God, her hands young and strong and beautiful. Grace touched her face. The woman in the mirror did the same. This couldn't be real. She pinched herself. Felt it. She splashed water on her face. The woman remained. She wanted to scream, to laugh, to cry. Instead, she whispered, "Hello." The young woman in the mirror whispered back. Grace stood there for a long time, just looking. Just remembering what it felt like to be the person people couldn't stop looking at. She burst out of the bathroom. The cafe was empty. No waiter. No old man in the corner. No one. On the counter sat her floral handbag. And a note. Take your time. You have enough of it. Grace grabbed her handbag and headed for the door. The brass bell chimed again. When she opened the door and stepped outside, Grace, or was she Lily now? Lily Miller, she decided. A new name for a new life stood on the street. She turned around. The cafe was gone. Just a brick wall between the bookstore and the dry cleaners. No door, no brass bell, no golden windows. As if it had never been there. Grace looked down at her hands. Young, smooth, real. She lifted her head high and started walking. The world was different when you were young. A man held the door at the bookstore. Actually held it, then smiled at her. Not a polite smile, an interested smile. At the coffee shop on the corner, not the magical one. The regular one. The barista called her beautiful while making her latte. Added an extra shot, no charge. In the boutique window, she caught her reflection and stopped. A young woman in an old woman's cardigan and sensible shoes. That wouldn't do. 45 minutes later, Grace emerged in dark jeans, a silk blouse the color of wine, and boots with a heel she hadn't worn in decades. They didn't hurt. Nothing hurt. She walked through downtown like she owned it. Men watched her. Women watched her. She was visible again. She was alive again. This, Grace thought, this is what I've been missing. Not youth. Power. Grace stood outside Jake's house as the sun set, her heart pounding. She'd been gone 4 hours. Had anyone noticed? She rang the doorbell. Jake answered, blinked. Can I help you? Hi, Grace said, pitching her voice slightly higher. I'm Lily Miller. My grandmother and your mother are cousins. From the East Coast. She said I could stay a few days? Confusion crossed Jake's face. My mom didn't mention. Jake? Grace called from inside, her own voice. Wait, how was that possible? Jake turned, and Grace saw herself, the old version, walk into the hallway wearing the cardigan she'd discarded. No, not herself. A projection? An echo? Old Grace waved. "That's Lily. I forgot to tell you she was coming. Let her in." As soon as Jake turned back, old Grace vanished like smoke. The waiter's voice echoed in her mind. "The juice lasts as long as you believe you need it." Jake stepped aside. "Sorry, come in. It's just been a crazy day." Grace Lily walked into her son's house as a stranger. Lucy was in the living room. She looked up, did a double take. "Who are you?" "Lily," Grace said. "My grandmother and your grandmother are cousins." "Didn't know Grandma had family on the East Coast." "There's a lot you don't know about your grandmother." Lucy shrugged, went back to her phone. But Grace saw it a flicker of interest. That night at dinner, Jake actually asked Lily questions. About her life, her work, her opinions on things. He listened to the answers. Lucy sat straighter, laughed at Lily's jokes. Grace felt warm, seen, included. As dinner was winding down, old Grace, still the projection, walked into the kitchen. Wearing her cardigan, carrying her handbag. "Oh, and Jake," she said. "I'm going on a trip tomorrow morning. Early, with some old friends. It'll be a few days. Lily can use my room." Jake looked up. "Where are you going?" "A cabin in the mountains. With some college friends. No cell service." She smiled. "I need the rest. Will you be okay alone?" "I'm 70, not dead." Old Grace laughed. "Lily, take care of these two for me." "Of course," young Grace Lily answered. Jake looked worried but nodded. "Be safe, Mom." Late that night, Grace stood in front of the mirror in her room. It felt like both versions, old and young, stood together. Then slowly, the old Grace faded. Like smoke, Grace, now fully Lily alone, lay down in the bed. And somewhere deep inside, a small voice whispered, "But they don't know it's you." The days that followed were golden. Jake invited Lily to family dinners, to movie nights, to Sunday brunch. He never invited Grace to those things. Grace just showed up, accepted background noise. But Lily was asked, chosen. Lucy started opening up. About school, about boys, about feeling invisible in her own life. "Everyone's so confident," Lucy said one afternoon, the two of them sitting on the porch. "I'm just here." Grace's heart ached. "I know that feeling." "You?" Lucy laughed. "You're gorgeous. You probably don't know what it's like." Grace wanted to say, "I'm your grandmother. I've felt invisible for years." "I see you, Lucy. I've always seen you." Instead, beauty fades. Confidence doesn't. You're braver than you think. Lucy looked at her like she'd said something profound. That night, Grace caught her reflection in a window and barely recognized herself. Not because she was young, because she was smiling. It happened on a Thursday. Grace Lily was making coffee when she glanced at her hand and saw it. A single age spot, just one, on her right hand, between thumb and forefinger. Her breath caught. She ran to the bathroom, locked the door, stared at her reflection. Still young, still smooth, still Lily, but the spot remained. Panic clawed up her throat. She scrubbed at it with soap. It didn't fade. The juice was wearing off. Grace ran through downtown, retracing her steps. Where was it? Between the bookstore and the dry cleaners, she'd said. But there were 4 shops between the bookstore and the dry cleaners now. A nail salon, a phone repair store, a juice bar, an empty storefront. No Moment Café. Grace walked the block 3 times. Her chest tight, her age spot burning like a brand. Then she turned a corner, and there it was. The brass bell, the golden light. She nearly fell through the door. The waiter was wiping down the counter, unhurried. "It's fading," Grace said. "I need more." He looked at her with those ageless eyes. "Do you?" "Yes. I can't go back. I can't be invisible again." "Invisible," he repeated softly. "Is that what you were?" You know what I was. Old, ignored, useless. The waiter set down his cloth. Your son called you 3 times the day you transformed. You didn't answer. Your granddaughter asked where you were. You weren't there to tell her. Grace froze. You weren't invisible, he said gently. You just weren't looking at the right reflection. Please, Grace whispered. Just one more bottle. He studied her for a long moment, then reached under the counter. Grace's heart leapt. He pulled out a mirror. Look, he said. Really look. Grace stared at her reflection. Young Lily stared back. What do you see? He asked. I see someone people notice. Someone who matters. Look deeper. Grace looked. Past the smooth skin. Past the bright eyes. I see, she said slowly, someone alone. Someone pretending. Someone whose own family doesn't recognize her. Her voice cracked on the last word. The waiter nodded. The juice lasts as long as you believe you need it. But here's the truth. Grace, you never needed it at all. That night, Jake opened a bottle of wine. Can I be honest with you, Lily? He said, pouring them each a glass. Grace nodded, afraid to speak. My mom. I love her. God, I love her. But she's exhausting. He ran a hand through his hair. She always needs validation. Always asking if she looks okay, if she matters, if we notice her. And I do notice her. I don't know how to tell her she doesn't have to work so hard. Grace's hand trembled around her wine glass. She raised me alone after Dad left, Jake continued. Worked 2 jobs. Drove me to every practice, every game. She was my hero. Was? Grace whispered. Is, Jake corrected. But she doesn't believe it. And I don't know how to make her believe it. So I just get frustrated. And that makes me feel like a terrible son. He looked at Lily with such raw honesty that Grace wanted to pull him into her arms. You're not terrible, Grace said. You're human. And she knows you love her. Does she? Grace thought about breakfast. About cold coffee and being talked over. Maybe she forgets sometimes, Grace said carefully. Maybe you both do. Jake nodded slowly. I should tell her, shouldn't I? Yes, Grace whispered. She needs to hear it. That night, Grace cried into her pillow. Not because Jake didn't love her. Because he did. He always had. And she'd been too busy performing to notice. The next morning, Lucy found Lily on the porch. Can I ask you something? Lucy said. Anything. Do you think people can be brave when they're old? Grace's breath caught. Why do you ask? I don't know. I look at Grandma sometimes, and she tries so hard to seem happy and confident. But I think she's scared. Like she's afraid we'll forget about her. Lucy picked at her nail polish. Is that stupid? No, Grace said, her voice thick. That's not stupid at all. I wish she knew she's kind of my hero, Lucy said quietly. She survived Grandpa leaving. She worked so hard for Dad. She's funny and smart and she doesn't take crap from anyone. But when I try to tell her, she just makes a joke and changes the subject. Grace felt something crack inside her chest. Maybe she doesn't believe she deserves to hear it, Grace said. That's sad. Yes, Grace whispered. It is. Lucy looked at her. You're crying. I'm thinking about my own grandmother, Grace lied. And wishing I'd told her. Told her what? That she mattered. That I saw her. That she didn't have to be young or perfect or invisible for me to think she was brave. Lucy was quiet for a moment. Then, I'm going to tell my grandma that. When she gets back from her trip. Grace smiled through tears. She'll love that. The second age spot appeared that afternoon. Then a line around Grace's eye. Then a silver thread in her hair. By evening, Lily Miller was fading. Grace looked at herself in the bathroom mirror and watched 45 years return to her face like a time lapse in reverse. No, not yet. She ran back to the cafe. The sun was setting, painting everything gold and desperate. The moment cafe was dark. A sign on the door, closed. Grace pounded on the glass. Please, I'm not ready. The door opened. The waiter stood there, but he was different now. Older, maybe 60, with kind lines around his eyes. You've seen what you needed to see, he said. I need more time. You have all the time you've lived. That's enough. It's not. I'm not ready to go back to being invisible. The waiter stepped aside, gestured to the café. Grace walked in. The golden light was dimmer now. Softer. He led her to a mirror on the wall. A large, ornate mirror that reflected the whole café. Look, he said. Grace looked. She saw herself 70 years old again. Wrinkled, gray, tired. I hate it, she whispered. Look closer. She looked. At the lines around her eyes, laugh lines, from years of joy. At her thin hands that had worked, had held her son, had made a life. At the face of a woman who had survived. Who had loved. Who had mattered all along. Time doesn't steal, Grace, the waiter said softly. It gives. It gives you stories, scars, wisdom, the faces of everyone you've loved, etched into your memory. Your son's first words, your son's graduation, the day you buried your mother and kept breathing. He touched her shoulder. You wanted to be seen. But you were looking in the wrong mirror. Grace turned to him, really looked at him for the first time. Who are you? She whispered. He smiled. I'm time. I'm the café you only see when you're ready. I'm the moment between who you were and who you'll become. His face shifted, young again, then old, then somewhere in between. You gave me youth, Grace said. No, I gave you perspective. He handed her the floral handbag she'd left behind. Her old watch. Her lipstick. These are yours. They always were. Grace took them. The watch was still ticking. What happens now? She asked. Now you go home. You tell them the truth. And you let them love you. What if they don't? They already do. But you have to stop running from it. The café began to fade around them, dissolving like sugar in water. Grace closed her eyes. When Grace opened her eyes, she was standing on Jake's doorstep. It was evening. She wore her old cardigan. Her sensible shoes. She was 70 again. And she was okay. She knocked. Jake opened the door. His face transformed from confusion to relief to concern. Mom, when did you get back? You said you'd be home last night. Sorry, the car broke down. I got delayed, Grace said. Jake pulled her into a hug. Are you okay? How was the trip? I'm sorry. Lucy appeared behind him, eyes red. Grandma? Hi, honey. Lily left, Lucy said. She didn't even say goodbye. I wanted to tell you about her, but she stopped. Looked at Grace closely. You look different. Do I? Yeah, calmer or something. Jake ushered her inside. Are you okay? Do you need anything? I need to talk to you, Grace said. Both of you. They sat at the kitchen table. The same table where this had started. Grace looked at her son. At her granddaughter. At the two people she'd thought weren't seeing her. I'm sorry, she began. For being exhausting. For needing so much validation. For not believing you when you showed me you loved me. Jake started to speak, but Grace held up a hand. Let me finish. I've spent so long being afraid of being invisible that I made myself small, made myself something to notice instead of someone to know. And in doing that, I missed what was right in front of me. She reached across the table, took Jake's hand. Took Lucis. You love me. I know that now. Not because I'm young or beautiful or perfect. But because I'm your mom. Your grandma. And that's enough. Grace's voice cracked. I just needed to believe it was enough. Jake squeezed her hand, his own eyes wet. Mom, you've always been enough. I'm sorry I made you think otherwise. I should have told you more, he continued. Should have said it out loud instead of just assuming you knew. You're my hero, Mom. You always have been. Lucy was crying now. Grandma, you're my hero too. I wanted to tell you, but you always changed the subject. I couldn't hear it, Grace admitted. I wasn't ready. Are you ready now? Lucy asked. Grace smiled. Yes, I think I am. They sat there in the kitchen, holding hands, crying and laughing. The coffee was hot. Grace was seen. And for the first time in years, she was home. 3 weeks later, Grace walked down Maple Street with Lucy. They passed the bookstore, the dry cleaners. Grace glanced between them. Just a brick wall. No cafe. She smiled. What? Lucy asked. Nothing. Just remembering something. They stopped at a regular cafe, the chain one on the corner. Ordered coffee. Sat in the sun. Grace looked at her granddaughter, who was looking at her phone but smiling. Lucy? Yeah? Thank you for seeing me. Lucy looked up, confused. What do you mean? Just, thank you. Lucy reached across the table, squeezed her grandmother's wrinkled hand. Always, Grandma. Grace looked down at their hands, young and old, together. Some things you lose. Some things you find. And some things were there all along. You just had to stop running long enough to see them. Grace sipped her coffee. It was perfect. And this time, she didn't check her watch.